The furnace in our basement coughed like an old man with pneumonia, and I was elbow-deep in its rusty guts when I heard my wife Jessica whispering in the kitchen above. Christmas Eve in our little Michigan town always brought out the worst in people, but this year felt different. The floorboards creaked as someone moved around upstairs, and I caught fragments of conversation drifting down through the heating vents. "Your brother is so trusting," Jessica's voice carried clearly through the old house's thin walls. "He'll never suspect the baby is yours, Brad." I froze, my wrench halfway to a loose bolt. Brad. My golden boy cousin, who'd been coming around more often lately, always with that smug smile and expensive cologne that made our humble home smell like a department store. "Father Donnelly says we just need to be patient," Brad's voice responded. "He'll help us figure this out after the holidays." Father Donnelly, our family priest, the man who'd married Jessica and me 15 years ago, who'd baptized our daughter Maddie, the same man sitting in our living room right now, supposedly here for Christmas Eve dinner. I stayed perfectly still in that basement, tools scattered around me, listening to my world crumble one whispered word at a time. The furnace gave another wheeze, and I wanted to kick the damn thing until it exploded. Instead, I climbed the creaky stairs with my best poker face, the one I'd perfected after years of dealing with Jessica's law firm colleagues who looked at me like I was something they'd scrape off their shoes. "How's that old furnace treating you, Danny?" Father Donnelly asked as I emerged into the kitchen, wiping grease from my hands with a rag. He was a thick-set man in his 50s, with kind eyes that suddenly seemed calculating. "Same as always, Father. Takes some coaxing, but it gets the job done." I looked directly at Jessica, who was stirring something on the stove with unusual intensity. Some things just need the right touch to keep them running. Brad lounged against our kitchen counter like he owned the place, his real estate success evident in every thread of his tailored shirt. "Maybe it's time to upgrade, Danny. I could help you find a place with better heating, modern conveniences, you know?" "I'm attached to old things," I said, watching Jessica's shoulders tense. "Call me sentimental, but I believe in fixing what's broken instead of throwing it away." Maddie burst through the front door, 17 and dramatic, her cheeks red from the December cold. "Dad, the neighbors are asking if you're going to fix their Christmas lights again this year. Mrs. Patterson says hers keep going out." "Tell Mrs. Patterson that some things can't be fixed," I replied, still looking at Jessica. "Sometimes the problem runs deeper than what you can see on the surface." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The next few hours passed in a haze of forced holiday cheer. We sat around our dining room table, the one Jessica had been nagging me to replace for years, and I watched this little drama unfold. Brad carved the turkey with theatrical precision, making jokes about his knife skills. Jessica laughed too loudly at everything he said. Father Donnelly blessed our meal and spoke about the sanctity of family bonds. I ate in silence, cataloging every stolen glance between my wife and cousin, every moment when the priest's eyes darted nervously between them. When Brad complimented Jessica's dress, his hand lingered on her shoulder just a second too long. When she served him seconds, her fingers brushed his in a way that looked accidental but wasn't. "Danny, you're quiet tonight," Father Donnelly observed. "Everything all right?" "Just thinking about trust, Father. You know how it's supposed to be the foundation of every relationship." I raised my glass of wine. "To family, where trust means everything." The toast fell flat. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Jessica's smile looked painted on. Maddie rolled her eyes and went back to texting. After dinner, I excused myself to check the furnace again. Really, I needed space to think. Down in that basement, surrounded by the smell of heating oil and old concrete, I started planning. Not some wild revenge fantasy, but something methodical. Something that would hurt them the way they'd hurt me. I'd always been underestimated. The blue-collar husband married to the successful lawyer, the guy who fixed things while other people made decisions. They thought I was too simple, too trusting, too grateful for what I had to ever question it. They were wrong. Over the next week, I became a different person. Not obviously different. I still went to work at Murphy's Auto Repair, still came home to make dinner when Jessica worked late, still helped neighbors with their small problems. But I was watching now, really watching, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Jessica would disappear for hours, claiming depositions or client meetings. Brad would call the house at odd times, hanging up when I answered. I found receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, hotel parking stubs in Jessica's car, and a burner phone hidden in her jewelry box. The phone was a gold mine. Months of text messages between Jessica and Brad, explicit and detailed. Plans for weekend getaways, discussions about how to handle the Danny problem. Most damning of all, a conversation from 3 weeks ago about Jessica's pregnancy test, and how they'd timed the announcement to make it believable. I photographed everything with my own phone, then put the burner back exactly where I'd found it. Let them think they were still clever. Father Donnelly's involvement became clearer as I dug deeper. He wasn't just providing spiritual cover for their affair, he was actively helping them plan it. The priest had gambling debts, I discovered through some careful questions to his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. Brad had been helping him with those debts in exchange for confession secrecy and marriage counseling sessions that painted me as an inattentive husband. The auto shop became my sanctuary during those January days. Murphy's was the kind of place where men came to complain about their wives, their jobs, their lives, and nobody judged anybody else for it. The smell of motor oil and the sound of pneumatic tools drowned out the noise in my head. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Murphy said one morning, sliding under a Honda Civic with a transmission problem. At 65, Murphy had seen every kind of human misery walk through his garage doors. "Just family stuff," I replied, focusing on the brake job in front of me. The repetitive work helped me think clearly. "Family stuff's the worst kind," Murphy agreed. "Can't fire family, can't return them to the store, can't trade them in for a newer model." I laughed despite myself. "No, you can't. But you could expose them. You could make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of people they really were." I started with the neighbors. Our street was full of retired folks who had nothing better to do than watch everyone else's business. Mrs. Patterson, the Christmas light lady, was particularly observant. "That cousin of yours has been coming around a lot lately," she mentioned when I stopped by to fix her porch light. "Nice car he drives, must be doing well for himself." "Brad's always been the successful one in the family," I said, tightening a loose wire. "Real estate's been good to him. He stays pretty late sometimes. I see his car in your driveway when I get up for my medication at midnight. Jessica's been working on some big case. I think Brad's been helping her with property research." Mrs. Patterson's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. Property research, at midnight, on weekends. I shrugged like it didn't matter to me. You know how lawyers are. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. Mrs. Patterson was the neighborhood's unofficial information hub. By the end of the week, I knew she'd be sharing her suspicions with anyone who'd listen. The real breakthrough came when I followed Jessica to one of her supposed late-night depositions. Instead of the law office, she drove to the Riverside Motel on the edge of town. Brad's BMW was already there, parked in front of room 237. I sat in my truck across the street for 2 hours, taking pictures with my phone's camera. Jessica leaving the room, adjusting her clothes, Brad kissing her goodbye in the parking lot. Their body language told the whole story. When I got home, Jessica was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I stood in our bedroom doorway, looking at this woman I'd shared 15 years with, and felt nothing but contempt. The next morning, she complained about being tired. "This case is wearing me out," she said over coffee. "All these late nights." "You should take better care of yourself," I replied, "especially now that you're pregnant." She smiled, the same smile that used to make my heart race. Now it just looked fake. "The doctor says everything's fine. Due date's in late August." I did the math in my head. If the baby was conceived when she claimed, we'd been trying for months with no success. Suddenly, one night in November, she was pregnant. The same week, Brad started coming around more often. "August," I repeated. "That's wonderful, honey. I can't wait to see if the baby has the family eyes." Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe? Or guilt? "Babies can look like anyone," she said quickly. "Genetics are complicated." "Not that complicated," I replied. "DNA doesn't lie." That afternoon, I drove to Brad's office. Pinnacle Real Estate occupied a glass-fronted building downtown, the kind of place that screamed success and ambition. Brad's headshot dominated the window display, all white teeth and perfect hair. The receptionist, a young woman who clearly had a crush on her boss, told me Brad was showing properties all day. Perfect. I walked around to the employee parking area and found his BMW. I didn't slash his tires or key his paint job. That would have been too obvious, too emotional. Instead, I did something much worse. I left a note under his windshield wiper. "Saw you at the Riverside last night. Room 237. Interesting property research. A concerned neighbor." Let him wonder who'd seen them. Let him panic about how much they knew. The note worked exactly as I'd hoped. That evening, Brad called Jessica 3 times. I could hear her side of the conversations from the kitchen, her voice getting higher and more strained with each call. "Nobody saw us," she insisted during the 3rd call. "You're being paranoid." But paranoia was exactly what I wanted. Paranoid people made mistakes. Father Donnelly's involvement required a more delicate approach. I couldn't confront a priest directly without looking like the bad guy. Instead, I started attending morning mass more regularly, something I hadn't done since Maddie's confirmation. "It's good to see you here, Danny," Father Donnelly said after one service. "Jessica mentioned you've been working a lot of overtime." "Just trying to provide for my family," I replied. "Speaking of which, I wanted to thank you for all the counseling you've been giving Jessica. She says you've been very understanding about our marriage problems." The priest's face went pale. "Marriage problems? Oh, she didn't tell you she told me?" I smiled innocently. "Jessica says you've been helping her work through some trust issues. Very modern approach to confession, having those sessions at the rectory." "I think there might be some confusion." "No confusion at all, Father. I appreciate you taking such a personal interest in our family's well-being. Not every priest would go to such lengths." I left him standing there, sweating in his collar despite the February cold. By March, the pressure was getting to all of them. Jessica started having headaches that kept her home from work. Brad's real estate listings dropped off significantly. Hard to focus on clients when you're constantly looking over your shoulder. Father Donnelly's sermons became rambling affairs about forgiveness and the dangers of gossip. I, meanwhile, was having the time of my life. "You seem different lately," Maddie observed one evening. She was sprawled across our living room couch, laptop balanced on her knees, probably making TikTok videos about how embarrassing her parents were. "Different how?" "I don't know. Happier, maybe? Like you know something funny that nobody else knows?" "Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes." "Maybe I'm just appreciating what I have," I said. "Your mother, this house, our family. Sometimes you don't realize how good things are until you almost lose them." Maddie made a face. "That's gross, Dad. Nobody wants to hear about you and Mom appreciating each other." If only she knew how little appreciating was actually happening between her mother and me. Jessica's pregnancy was starting to show, which added another layer of urgency to the situation. She and Brad were getting sloppy, taking bigger risks. I caught them having hushed phone conversations in our own living room. Brad started showing up for family dinners twice a week. The breaking point came in April, during Maddie's spring break. Jessica announced she was taking a long weekend for a legal conference in Chicago. Brad, coincidentally, had business meetings in the same city on the same dates. I told Jessica I thought it was a great idea. She needed the rest. I'd hold down the fort at home. What I actually did was follow them to Chicago. The conference hotel was easy to find. Jessica had left the confirmation email open on our home computer. I booked a room on the same floor, 3 doors down from theirs. Yes, theirs. They'd reserved a suite under Brad's name. For 3 days, I documented everything. Photos of them holding hands in the hotel restaurant, video of Brad kissing Jessica's pregnant belly in the hallway outside their room, audio recordings of their conversations about how much longer they'd have to keep up the charade with me. The most damaging evidence came on their last night. I was sitting in the hotel bar when Jessica called me, supposedly from her room. "Hi, honey," she said, slightly breathless. "Just wanted to check in before bed." "How's the conference going?" "Boring, mostly. Lots of contract law seminars. I miss you." While she was talking to me, I could see her across the bar, sitting in a corner booth with Brad. His hand was on her thigh. She was smiling at something he whispered in her ear. "I miss you too," I said into the phone. "Can't wait for you to come home tomorrow." "Me neither. I should get some sleep. Love you." "Love you too." She hung up and immediately leaned over to kiss Brad. I got it all on video. The drive home from Chicago gave me time to plan the next phase. I had enough evidence to destroy both their reputations, but I wanted something bigger. Something public. Something that would hurt them the way they'd hurt me, but worse. I wanted them to feel what it was like to have everyone you trust turn against you. Back home, I started planting seeds. A comment to Jessica's law partner about how distracted she seemed lately. A casual mention to Brad's business associates about his frequent out-of-town trips. Nothing direct, nothing accusatory, just enough to make people start paying attention. The real masterpiece was Father Donnelly. I scheduled a private confession session and told him I was having doubts about my marriage. "I keep thinking Jessica might be seeing someone else," I said, sitting across from him in the rectory office. "I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling." The priest shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What makes you think that, Danny?" "Little things. Late nights, unexplained absences, changes in her behavior, and this pregnancy. Father, we'd been trying for over a year with no success. Then suddenly, 1 month, she's expecting. It just seems miraculous," Father Donnelly suggested weakly. "Suspicious." I watched him struggle with the contradiction. He couldn't counsel me to trust my wife without revealing his own involvement in her betrayal. He couldn't advise me to investigate without exposing himself. "Perhaps you should focus on supporting Jessica during this difficult time," he finally said. "Pregnancy can be stressful. Women sometimes behave differently." "You're probably right, Father. I'm sure I'm just being paranoid. After all, what kind of person would betray their family? What kind of man would sleep with his cousin's wife? What kind of priest would help them cover it up?" Father Donnelly's face went white. "Danny, I think you should—" "Should what, Father? Should trust the people closest to me? Should believe in the sanctity of marriage vows? Should have faith in my spiritual advisor?" I stood up, smoothing down my jacket. "Don't worry, Father. I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should. Truth has a way of coming to light, doesn't it?" I left him sitting there, probably reaching for the bottle of whiskey I'd noticed in his desk drawer. May brought warmer weather and Jessica's second trimester. She was glowing, people kept telling me. Radiant. So happy about the pregnancy. If only they knew why she was really glowing. I started making preparations for the main event. Not some dramatic confrontation in our living room, but something public. Something that would ensure the whole town knew exactly what kind of people Jessica, Brad, and Father Donnelly really were. The annual St. Mary's Spring Festival seemed perfect. Held every Memorial Day weekend in the church parking lot, it drew hundreds of people from our community. Local families, church members, business leaders, everyone would be there. I volunteered to help with the audio-visual setup. "Danny's always been good with electronics," Father Donnelly told the festival committee, not meeting my eyes. He'd been avoiding me since our confession session, which only made him look more guilty. "Happy to help," I said cheerfully. "I've got some great ideas for this year's presentation." The festival traditionally included a slideshow of community highlights from the past year. Weddings, graduations, local business successes, church events, all projected on a large screen for everyone to see while they ate funnel cakes and listened to the high school marching band. I had something special planned for this year's slideshow. Meanwhile, the pressure continued building on my targets. Jessica's law firm was asking questions about her recent performance. Several clients had complained about missed deadlines and distracted behavior during meetings. Her boss, Margaret Chen, called the house one evening. "Is Jessica feeling all right?" Margaret asked when I answered. "She's seemed off lately, not like herself." "The pregnancy's been tough on her," I replied, loud enough for Jessica to hear from the kitchen. "Morning sickness, fatigue, emotional ups and downs. You know how it is. Of course, please tell her to take care of herself. We're all rooting for her." After I hung up, Jessica appeared in the doorway. "What did Margaret want?" "Just checking on you. She's concerned about your well-being." Jessica's face tightened. "Concerned how?" "Work performance, mostly. Missed deadlines, distracted behavior. I told her it was pregnancy symptoms." "It's not pregnancy symptoms," Jessica snapped. "I'm perfectly capable of doing my job." "I'm sure you are, honey. Though it must be hard to concentrate when you're juggling so many responsibilities." She stared at me for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if I meant something deeper. I just smiled and went back to reading my newspaper. Brad was having his own problems. Word was getting around that Pinnacle Real Estate was struggling. Clients were complaining about poor service, missed appointments, unprofessional behavior. His business partner, Jim Morrison, stopped by the auto shop one afternoon. "You know your cousin pretty well, right, Danny?" Jim asked while I worked on his truck's transmission. "Brad, sure, we grew up together." "He's been acting strange lately. Distracted, unreliable, missing important meetings, screwing up paperwork. Yesterday he showed up 2 hours late for a closing and couldn't explain where he'd been." "That doesn't sound like Brad," I said, though it sounded exactly like someone whose secret life was falling apart. "I'm thinking about buying him out," Jim continued. "Can't have a partner I can't depend on." "That's a shame. Brad's always prided himself on his professionalism." "Well, something's gotten into him. Maybe you could talk to him, family to family?" "I'll see what I can do." But I had no intention of helping Brad. I was too busy making sure his problems got worse. The anonymous notes started appearing in late May. Nothing threatening, nothing that could be traced back to me. Just uncomfortable reminders that someone was watching. Brad found one tucked under his windshield wiper. "Room 237 was busy last night. Hope the property research was productive." Jessica discovered one in her desk at work. "Interesting legal conference in Chicago. Very hands-on learning experience." Father Donnelly's was slipped into his hymnal. "Confession is good for the soul. Some confessions are better than others." Each note sent them into a panic. Phone calls between the three of them increased. Paranoid conversations about who might know, what they should do, whether they should come clean or brazen it out. I listened to it all through Jessica's burner phone, which I'd learned to access remotely. Modern technology was wonderful when you knew how to use it. The festival was 2 weeks away when Jessica finally cracked. "Danny, we need to talk," she said one evening after Maddie had gone to bed. "Sure, honey. What about?" She sat down across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I think someone's been watching me," she said. "Following me, maybe. I've been getting these strange notes." "Notes? What kind of notes?" "Cryptic messages. Like someone knows things about my schedule, my activities. It's making me nervous." I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt cold, clammy. "Have you called the police?" "I can't. The notes, they reference things that might be misunderstood, taken out of context." "What kind of things?" Jessica pulled her hand away. "Private things. Personal business that someone could twist to make me look bad." "Honey, you're not making sense. What could you possibly be doing that someone would want to use against you?" She stared at me for a long moment. I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Tell me the truth and face the consequences, or keep lying and hope the problem went away. She chose to keep lying. "It's probably nothing," she said finally. "Just some crank who has too much time on their hands. I'm probably being paranoid." "Pregnancy hormones," I agreed sympathetically. "They can make you feel anxious about everything." "Right, pregnancy hormones." But we both knew it wasn't pregnancy hormones making her sweat through her shirt in our air-conditioned kitchen. Memorial Day weekend arrived with perfect weather. Sunny skies, gentle breeze, ideal conditions for St. Mary's Spring Festival. I spent the morning setting up audio-visual equipment in the church parking lot, testing microphones and adjusting the projection screen. "Everything looking good, Danny?" Father Donnelly asked nervously. He'd been hovering around the setup all morning, clearly anxious about what I might have planned. "Perfect, Father. This is going to be a festival nobody forgets." Jessica and Maddie arrived around noon. Jessica looked pale and tired, her pregnancy now obvious to everyone. Maddie immediately disappeared to find her friends, leaving Jessica to navigate the social minefield alone. "The screen looks bigger this year," Jessica observed, staring up at the projection setup. "New equipment," I explained. "High definition, crystal clear image quality. Every detail will be visible, even from the back of the crowd." Brad showed up fashionably late, as always. His BMW looked freshly washed, his clothes perfectly pressed, but I could see the strain around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. The anonymous notes had been taking their toll. "Great turnout this year," he said, joining Jessica and me near the food tables. "Best ever," I agreed. "The whole community's here. Mrs. Patterson, the Johnsons from down the street, Margaret from Jessica's law firm, Jim from your real estate office. Even the mayor showed up." Brad's smile faltered slightly. "A lot of familiar faces." "That's what makes it special," I said. "Everyone who matters to us. All in one place?" The afternoon proceeded normally. Local businesses had set up booths selling everything from handmade crafts to insurance policies. The high school band played patriotic songs. Children ran around with cotton candy and balloons. It was small-town America at its most wholesome. At 4 o'clock, Father Donnelly took the microphone to begin the traditional community slideshow. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's time for our annual look back at the year's highlights." The crowd gathered around the projection screen, maybe 200 people total. I stood at the back, operating the laptop that controlled the presentation. The first few slides were exactly what people expected. The Henderson wedding from last September, Tommy Morrison's high school graduation, the ribbon cutting for the new library wing. Everyone smiled and applauded at appropriate moments. Then things took an interesting turn. "This next section celebrates the theme of family bonds," Father Donnelly announced, reading from the script I'd prepared for him. "The special relationships that make our community strong." The first slide showed Jessica and Brad at the hotel restaurant in Chicago. They were holding hands across the table, looking into each other's eyes like lovers. A murmur went through the crowd. Father Donnelly squinted at the screen, then looked back at me in panic. "The next slide shows the importance of trust in relationships," I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. This one was Jessica kissing Brad in the hotel hallway, her pregnant belly pressed against him. The murmur became a buzz of shocked conversation. People were pointing at the screen, then looking around for Jessica and Brad in the crowd. "Danny, stop this," Jessica hissed, pushing through the crowd toward me. "Stop what, honey? I thought people should see how close our family really is." The next slide was a text message conversation, blown up large enough for everyone to read. Brad telling Jessica how much he loved her, Jessica responding that she couldn't wait to start their new life together after she got rid of the Danny problem. The buzz became a roar. People were shouting questions, pointing accusingly, pulling out their phones to record the chaos. Father Donnelly had dropped the microphone and was trying to reach the laptop to shut it down. I blocked his path easily. "This final slide," I announced, "shows the spiritual guidance our family has received during this difficult time." The last image was a photo I'd taken through the rectory window. Father Donnelly, Jessica, and Brad huddled together around a table covered with papers. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 weeks ago, during one of their planning sessions. The crowd erupted. Angry voices, shocked gasps, the sound of chairs being knocked over as people surged forward for a better look. "You lying witch!" Mrs. Patterson shouted at Jessica. "Acting all high and mighty while you're carrying on like a common tramp." "How could you do this to Danny?" someone else yelled. Brad was trying to push his way toward the parking lot, but the crowd blocked his escape. "It's not what it looks like," he kept saying, but nobody was listening. Father Donnelly had given up trying to stop the slideshow and was backing toward the church building. His face was the color of old concrete. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out over the noise, "I'd like to thank you all for coming to this year's festival. As you can see, it's been very educational." Jessica finally reached me, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You bastard!" she snarled. "You've ruined everything." "I've revealed everything," I corrected. "There's a difference. The baby isn't mine. We both know that. Now everyone else knows it too." She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist. "Careful, Jessica. You're already the center of attention. Don't make it worse." The crowd was calling for answers, demanding explanations. Margaret Chen, Jessica's boss, was staring at her employee with disgust and disappointment. Jim Morrison had cornered Brad near the dunking booth, jabbing his finger in his partner's chest. "How long?" I asked Jessica quietly, while chaos swirled around us. "How long have you been planning to leave me for him?" "Since Christmas," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "We were going to wait until after the baby was born, then file for separation. And Father Donnelly was going to provide marriage counseling that painted me as an unfit husband." She nodded miserably. "Well, congratulations. You're free to be with Brad now. I'm sure the whole town will be very supportive of your relationship." I looked around at the angry faces, the pointing fingers, the cell phone cameras recording every moment of Jessica's humiliation. Actually, on second thought, maybe not. Brad had broken free from Jim Morrison and was making his way toward us, his perfect hair disheveled, his expensive shirt torn. "Danny, you don't understand," he started. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You've been sleeping with my wife, planning to steal my family, and using our priest to cover it up. What part am I missing? It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Brad? You'd gradually convince everyone I was a bad husband while you played the supportive cousin? Jessica would leave me for irreconcilable differences and coincidentally end up with you? The baby would grow up thinking you were just a close family friend?" Brad's face crumpled. "We never meant to hurt you. You just meant to destroy my life quietly. Much more considerate." Father Donnelly had reached us, sweating profusely in his clerical collar. "Danny, please. This isn't the Christian way to handle." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't you dare talk to me about Christian behavior. You took confession from my wife about her affair and helped her plan it. You counseled me to trust her while you knew she was betraying me. You're not a priest, you're an accomplice." The crowd had quieted down enough to hear our conversation. Every word was being absorbed, recorded, shared. By tomorrow, the whole county would know the story. "I want all of you to leave," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Jessica, pack your things and get out of my house. Brad, stay away from my family. Father, I think the bishop might be interested in hearing about your counseling techniques." "Danny, please," Jessica tried one more time. "We can work this out. Go to counseling. Try to save our marriage." "Our marriage ended the first time you slept with my cousin. This is just the public announcement." I walked away from them, through the crowd of shocked neighbors and friends, toward my truck in the parking lot. Behind me, I could hear Jessica crying, Brad arguing with Jim Morrison, Father Donnelly trying to explain himself to increasingly hostile parishioners. Mrs. Patterson caught up with me at my truck. "Danny, I'm so sorry. If I'd known what was really going on—" "You tried to warn me," I said. "I appreciate that. What will you do now?" I looked back at the chaos I'd created. Jessica was being comforted by her sister, who'd driven down from Grand Rapids. Brad was on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. Father Donnelly had disappeared entirely. "Now I start over," I said, "without the people who thought I was too stupid to notice what they were doing to me. I drove home to our empty house, where 15 years of marriage photos still hung on the walls and Jessica's coffee cup still sat in the kitchen sink. Tomorrow I'd start the process of untangling our shared life. Divorce papers, custody arrangements, property division. Tonight, I was going to sit on my front porch with a drink and enjoy the peace and quiet. For the first time in months, I didn't have to wonder what Jessica was really doing, where Brad actually was, or whether Father Donnelly was plotting against me. Their secrets were out, their reputations were in ruins, and their carefully planned future together had exploded in front of half the town. I'd given them exactly what they deserved. Not violence, not threats, just the truth presented at the worst possible moment in the most public way imaginable. Trust, as I'd learned, really was for fools. But revenge? Revenge was for people smart enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike back. The sun was setting over our little Michigan town, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere across town, Jessica was probably explaining to Maddie why Mommy wouldn't be coming home tonight. Brad was likely dealing with the collapse of his business reputation. Father Donnelly was facing questions from his superiors about his fitness for ministry. And I was finally free of all of them. It had been, I reflected, a very successful Memorial Day festival. One that nobody in our community would ever forget.